Chapter 1: Three main themes in managerial approach: business ethics, sustainability, and stakeholder management. 4 components of corporate social responsibility, known as CSR. Economic equals maximize sales, minimize cost, and legal equals obey laws, stick to regulations. Ethical means do what is right, fair and just, and philanthropic equals give back. Business: the collection of private, commercially oriented organizations, ranging in size from sole proprietorships to corporate giants. Business and society interrelate in a macro environment as stakeholders. A macro environment is the complete societal context in which the organization resides. Business power: the ability or capacity to produce an effect or to bring influence to bear on a situation or people. Elements in social contract is laws or regulations or rules of the game. Also, share understanding of each other between businesses or society or stakeholder. Enduring issues that will be of concern of society on a continuing basis and for which management must develop a thoughtful organizational response. Entitlement mentality is the general belief that someone is owed something just because she or he is a member of society. Ethics refers to the issues of right, wrong, fairness, and justice, which are the 4 ethics. Iron law of responsibility: in the long run, those who do not use power in a manner society considers responsible will tend to lose it. Managerial approach: what changes are occurring or will occur in society's expectations of business that mandate businesses taking the initiative with respect to particular societal or ethical problems. Pluralism refers to a diffusion of power among society's many groups and organizations. Pluralism's strengths: there are 5. Prevents concentration of power, freedom of expression and action, disperses individual allegiances, creates diversified set of loyalties, and provides checks and balance. Sustainability: meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Urgent issues: issues or crises that arise in the moment, and management must give a quick response. Victimization philosophy: in such a society of sufferers, feelings rather than reason or facts prevail, and people start perceiving that they are being unfairly hurt by society's institutions. Chapter 2: Corporate citizenship: a collective term embracing the concepts of corporate social responsibility, responsiveness, and performance. Corporate social performance: what companies are able to achieve the results or outcomes of their acceptance of social responsibility and the adoption of responsiveness viewpoint. Corporate social responsibility encompass the economic, legal, ethical, and discretionary philanthropic expectations that society has of organizations at a given point in time. Corporate social responsiveness is an action phase of monument's response in the social sphere. Pluralism weaknesses: pursuit of self-interest, proliferates organizations and groups with overlapping goals, forces conflicts to center stage, promotes efficiency. And there are 4. Revolution of rising expectations: this is the belief or an attitude that each succeeding generation ought to have a standard of living higher than that of its predecessors. Rights movement: a social trend that emphasizes what's right to which groups and individuals are entitled. A right is something owns someone, such as legal or moral right. A right is sometimes seen as an entitlement. Social contract is a set of reciprocal understandings that characterize the relationship between major institutions, in our case, business and society. Societal problem. A gap between society's expectation of social condition and the current social realities. Society. A community, a nation, or a broad group of people with common traditions, values, institutions, and collective activities and interests. Special interest society. Pluralism taken to extreme. Stakeholders. Individuals or groups with which business interacts and who have a vested interest in the firm. Cost-benefit approach. Firms will undertake it if they can identify direct benefits that exceeds cost. The CSR exemplary firms go well beyond the typical and established patterns for business firms in terms of their SR excellence. CSR should strive for pyramid. Be profitable, obey the law, be ethical, be a good corporate citizen. Defensive approach. Designed to alleviate pain, to avoid pressure that makes them incur costs. Ethical responsibilities. Full scope of norms, standards, values, and expectations that reflect what consumers, employers, shareholders, and the community regard as fair, just, and consistent with respect for or protection of stakeholders' moral rights. Innovation and learning approach. Provide new opportunities to understand the marketplace and enhances organizational learning, which leads to competitive advantage. Mainstream adopters. All other conventional business that have adopted, practiced, and achieved some degree of excellence or recognition for SR policies and practices. Strategic approach. Firms will recognize the changing environment and engage with CSR as part of a deliberate emergent strategy. Total corporate social responsibility is economic responsibilities plus legal responsibilities plus ethical responsibilities plus philanthropic responsibilities. Chapter 3. Legitimacy refers to the perceived validity or appropriateness of the stakeholder's claim to a stake. Power refers to the ability or capacity of a stakeholder to produce an effect. Primary social stakeholders have a direct stake in the organization and its success and therefore are most influential. The primary stakeholders have a direct stake in the organization and its success. Secondary social stakeholders may be extremely influential as well, especially in affecting reputation and public standing, but their stake in the organization is more indirect. Secondary stakeholders have a public or special interest stake in the organization that is more indirect. Stakeholder. Any individual or group who can affect or is affected by the actions, decisions, policies, practices, or goals of the organization. Stakeholder culture embraces the beliefs, values, and practices that organizations have developed for addressing stakeholder issues and relationships. Stakeholder thinking, the process of always reasoning in stakeholder terms throughout the management process. Urgency refers to the degree to which the stakeholder's claim demands immediate attention or response. Chapter 4. Backdating allows the recipient to purchase stock at yesterday's price, resulting in an immediate wealth increase. Bullet dodging, delaying of a stock option grant until right after bad news. CEO duality. This occurs when the CEO serves the dual function of CEO and chairman. The board of directors, activist shareholders oppose this role as it is a double-edged sword. Clawback provisions. Compensation recovery mechanism that enables a company to recoup CEO pay in the event of financial misconduct. Corporate governance, a method by which a firm is governed, directed, administrated, or controlled in the goals for which is the governance. Insider trading, the practice of buying or selling a security by someone who has access to material info that is not available to the public. Legitimacy, a condition that prevails when there is a congruence between an organization activity and society's expectations. Material information, info that a reasonable investor might want to use and that is likely to affect the price of a firm's stock once that info is released to the public. Personal liability, the business judgment rule. It was never intended to absolve board members completely from personal liability. In cases where the good faith standard was not upheld, board members have been held personally liable and paid a hefty price. Poison pill. When a hostile suitor acquires more than a certain percentage of a company's stock, shareholders are able to purchase shares, thus diluting the suitor's holdings and making the acquisitions prohibitively expensive. Proxy access provides shareholders with the opportunity to propose their own nominees for the board of directors. In previous systems, shareholders must file in a separate ballot if they want to nominate their own candidate for direct positions. Shareholder activism. Shareholders can influence a corporation's behavior by exercising their rights as owners. Spring loading. Granting of a stock option at today's price, but with inside knowledge the stock value is improving. Stock options. Allows the recipient to purchase stock in the future at price it is today. Bottom line mentality. This is chapter 7. When respect for authority, structure, loyalty, conformity, performance, and results are operating together, they form a bottom line mentality that is remarkably influential in its impact on individual and group behavior. Business ethics is concerned with the morality and fairness in behavior, actions, policies, and practices that take place with a business contact. Conventional approach. Based on how common society today views business ethics, ordinary common sense. Descriptive ethics, concerned with describing, characterizing, and studying the morality of people, an organization, a culture, or a society. Ethical egoism, based on the idea that the individual should seek to maximize his or her own self-interest as a legitimate factor. Ethical relativism, we pick up and choose which source of norms we wish to use on the basis of what will justify our current actions or maximize our freedom. Ethical test approach, based on short practical questions or tests to guide ethical decision-making, behavior, and practices. Ethics, discipline that deals with moral duty and obligation. Immoral management, an approach that is devoid of ethical principles or precepts and at the same time implies a positive and active opposition to what is ethical. Intentional immoral management is managers of this type do not factor ethical considerations into their decisions, actions, and behaviors because it's believed business activity resides outside the sphere to which moral judgments apply. Moral development. There is a general sequence of 3 levels, each with 2 stages, through which individuals advance in learning to think or develop morally. Moral management. Professional standards of conduct, highest standards of ethical behavior. Normative ethics, concerned with supplying and justifying a coherent moral system of thinking and judging. Post-conventional, autonomous, principled level of moral development is, Kohlberg says, few people reach this level. If they do, they have a hard time to retain this level for long. Ethically, level 3 is when individuals embrace and perceive them as right, when an individual can justify his or her actions on a higher ethical basis. Pre-conventional level of moral development is relatable to characteristics as children. Stage 1 is reaction to punishment. Stage 2 and 3 are seeking for reward stage. Like children, adults react to punishments, organizational sanctions, and see rewards as approval. Principles approach, based on the use of guidelines to justify and direct behavior, actions, and policies. Unintentional immoral management is managers who lack moral sense. They are attentive to the fact that their decisions may have a negative effect on others. Chapter 8. Overconfidence bias is tendency for people to be more confident of their own moral character or behavior than they have objective reason to be. Corporate transparency is a quality, characteristic, or state in which activities, process, practices, and decisions that take place in companies become open or visible to the outside world. Distributive justice refers to the distribution of benefits and burdens. Ethical leadership. Leadership that is directed by respect for ethical beliefs and values, and for the dignity and rights of others. Ethical tests Big Four. Don't compromise your action or decision by greed, speed, laziness, or haziness. Ethical test common sense. If the proposed course of action doesn't pass the smell test, don't do it. Ethical test gag test. If you feel deeply uneasy sick to the prospect of carrying out a proposed course of action, don't do it. Ethical test making something public. If you would be comfortable with people knowing you did something, don't do it. Ethical test one's best self. If the proposed course of action is not consistent with your perception of yourself at your excellence level, don't engage in it. Ethical test purified idea is don't think that others, such as an accountant or a lawyer, can clean your proposed action by saying they think it is okay. Ethical test. Several assessments that will be useful in helping to clarify the appropriate course of action in a decision situation. Ethical test ventilation. Expose your proposed course of action to others' opinions. Ethics audits. Mechanisms or approaches by which a company may assess or evaluate its ethical climate or programs. Ethics of care is a theory about what makes actions morally right or wrong. Ethics orientation, the approach an individual takes to making ethical judgment through ethical perceptions and sensitivity with the ability to recognize the ethical nature of a situation or profession. Ethics screen, several select standards against which the proposed course of action is to be compared. Formal ethics program, organizational units, people, or departments that have been assigned the responsibility for ethics in the organization. Fraud risk assessments. Review process designed to identify and monitor conditions and events that may have some bearing on the company's exposure to compliance, misconduct, risk, and to review companies' methods for dealing with these concerns. The Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Ill-conceived goals. Poorly set goals that encourage negative behavior, such as sales goals, emphasize too much or set too high. Incrementalism. Predisposition towards a slippery slope. Moral rights is justifiable claims or entitlements that do not depend on a legal system to be valid. Negative right is the right to be left alone. Positive right is the right to do something. Procedural justice refers to fair decision-making procedures, practices, and agreements. Servant leadership, an approach to ethical leadership and decision-making based on the moral principle of serving others first. Smell test. If a proposed course of action stinks, don't do it. Sustainability audit. Takes an inventory of all the policies, procedures, and practices of an organization and compares these to the best practices in their industry. Utilitarianism. We should take the course of action that represents the greatest good for the greatest number. That's it, babe. Good luck.